Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of Disturbed. These 4 stories were voted on by our Patreon and selected as the best reads from last month's episodes. If you want to weigh in for next month's best of, join the Patreon at the link in the description. Without further ado, let's get to our first story. First, a haunting reminder to keep people at arm's length. That way, when you see who they really are, they can't ruin your whole life. Narrated by Tara Ash.
A few months ago, I was in the youth psych ward due to my depression spiraling out of control. It wasn't an easy time in my life. While I was in the ward, though, I met a girl who would always listen and be super nice to me. There weren't a lot of people I could talk to, but she seemed to be a good friend. That being said, the things she would share with me about herself were very unsettling. She said she had abused animals in her childhood, was able to turn her empathy off, and wanted to kill her parents. I was bored and suicidal, so I was thrilled by this unique friendship. I thought nothing of the potential risks since we were locked in anyway. I got better, though, and left the hospital. Soon after my release, she successfully contested her court order and was discharged too, against medical advice. We had swapped numbers in the ward, so she reached out after her release. We began texting semi-frequently, and I realized that I was the only person she could confide in. I really did feel bad for her. She would tell me about how bad she was doing and about her suicidal thoughts. Then, randomly one day, she left me a voicemail while I was at school. I sat in my car and listened as she told me she was planning a whole rampage to kill all the people who had wronged her. I was in complete shock. I went to the police, who, after questioning me, went to pay her a visit. They called me later that night and said they didn't think she was a danger at all and was probably just angry when she said all those terrible things. Naturally, she assumed that it was me who had betrayed her, but I tried my best to convince her it had probably been my parents who had checked my phone and reported it. She at least pretended to believe me. All that happened a couple weeks ago, and everything seemed like it was back to normal. Earlier today, I checked my phone between classes and noticed she had sent me a photo. No words, no context, nothing. When I clicked it, my jaw dropped. It showed her posing with bloody hands and face and a lighter in her hand and a burning stove in the background. I, of course, concluded the worst and called the police right away. They asked me to come back in for questioning, and they told me they already knew about it. She had caused a decent-sized fire in an apartment block and smashed some windows after a fight with her parents. Fortunately, no one besides her was hurt. They thanked me for providing them with further proof and told me she would probably go back to the psych ward. When I left the police interview room, I honestly couldn't believe my eyes. She was sitting there, right in front of me on a bench in the hallway looking at the floor. Our eyes met and I just stood there in shock. Her face looked the same, and after a moment, I quickly walked away. I feel like I'm in deep trouble. Eventually, she'll be released again, and now there's no denying that I snitched on her. I have no trust in the judicial system anymore. The policeman told me she might be a danger to me, but she'll be locked up for a while now, and if the smallest thing happens, I can just call 911. Like that'll save me from my ex-best friend with psychopathic tendencies and a violent past. This is your sign to not stay in touch with the suspect psych ward friend, because that story might not end well. I hope mine does.
Next, a story narrated by Paul Brown from Reddit user Pisky Wendigo. A terrifying encounter deep in the Mississippi swamps.
This isn't something I witnessed. I was told this story by one of the men who allegedly saw it. This guy had run with some questionable crowds and did what jobs he had to make money at times, if you get my drift. So he has a lot of stories. Now, I mostly consider this a tall tale, but a part of me wonders, what if it is true? This guy is called Zed, and according to him, he had been finishing up some work down in Louisiana back in the late 1990s with his buddy and had a few days to kill. They wanted to get some fishing and hunting in, albeit out of season. And one of the guys they had worked with gave them directions to a spot way back in the swamps and marshes, or the bayou, as it's more commonly called down there. They were told that in this area they could fish without risking being caught by fish and game agents. He said one of the best things about this spot was that there were, oddly enough, never any alligators there. And this may sound like a perk, but it's a bit of a red flag, really. Anyways, one fine morning, they set out in their boat before the sun was up, navigating their way through the swamps. From what he described, this was a section that was close to the Mississippi border. Smugglers used this route to move various products across state lines, apparently. The two friends finally arrived at the spot after a few hours and some detours, their way of not admitting they got lost. They turned off the motor on their boat and started fishing. The trees were just thick enough to prevent you from being seen from overhead, and they were essentially in a huge inlet that was somewhat sheltered from the rest of the bayou and had the start of solid land along two sides of it. Now, by solid land, that also meant you had to walk across 10 to 15 feet of muck that could suck your boots off before you actually got to solid ground. Now, according to Zed, as the day progressed, the fishing wasn't going great, but they still had beer, so they weren't inclined to go anywhere. They both noted that there were no alligators, just as the guy had said. And normally you could spot them lurking around or, sunning themselves, but they were just utterly gone from the spot, as were most of the big fish, it seemed. It was at this point they observed a herd of feral hogs emerge from the undergrowth on one side of the lagoon, make their way to the thick muck, and commence rolling and rooting around in it to their heart's content. Zed and his buddies slowly angled their boat closer, as they had sidearms with them and certainly had no issues with getting wild pork instead of fish if the opportunity was there. The hogs were leery, but not afraid, keeping the humans in their line of sight as they frolicked. Zed saw that they had no real way to get a hog if they shot it there, so they just floated along and watched for a good opportunity. Instead, they saw something else entirely. that's when they saw the mud start to move. Now, Zed knew instantly it wasn't an alligator, as an alligator would be flailing around in the mud trying to reach the hogs. The only way he could describe it was something was pushing its way through the muck like a mostly submerged bulldozer, creeping up on the pigs. Zed and his buddy watched as this thing slowly approached a cluster of hogs who had noticed the movement but seemed more curious than afraid. One of them, a pig that Zed estimated was about 175 pounds, was the furthest out in the muck and made the mistake of attempting to sniff at whatever the intruder was. Zed said that quicker than they could react, something lunged out from the thing and attached to the pig's head and face. As the pig thrashed and tried to jump back, letting out the most blood-curdling scream they'd ever heard, the thing was hauled partially out of the muck and came into better view. Zed realized it was an alligator snapping turtle, of proportions he had never heard of. He's seen the one they keep at the Bass Pro Shop that got big enough that it cracked its tank and had to get a new one, and he said that was like comparing a Chihuahua to a pit bull. And it was still partially obscured by the muck that was covering it, but Zed swore its shell had to be at least the size of the hood of a Volkswagen Beetle. He was an extreme car enthusiast, so he knew his vehicles. He guessed it was well over 500 pounds. The turtle started backing up into deeper water, dragging the pig with it. Zed said from what they could see, the turtle's head was so big that it was able to fit its jaws partially around the pig's skull, and its beak was now essentially acting as a meat hook. It was about a 30-second fight to drag the pig out into the lagoon, but Zed said it was clear the pig never had a chance. The turtle dragged it out into the water, and the pig made one last desperate attempt to break free. Apparently hearing something screaming underwater one last time is as unnerving as you'd imagine, and Hollywood doesn't get the sound right. After that, it just went absolutely quiet. According to Zed, he and his buddy sat there for a minute, just processing what they had seen. And except for the froth on the top of the water and the stirred up mud, there was no sign that anything had just happened. The other hogs had fled as soon as their comrade was attacked, and the swamp was completely silent, other than the faint hum of bayou bugs. Zed and his buddy booked it out of there. They couldn't go to Fish and Game and describe what they saw, since they weren't supposed to be in that area in the first place. But they did fill in their acquaintance on why there were no alligators in that area. As far as Zed knew, nobody else has reported sightings of this colossal turtle. He said that it was big enough that if it caught a person unawares, it could easily overpower and kill a human the same way it did that pig. I've never traveled deep into the bayou, so who knows what could be lurking out of sight.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. Our next story is narrated by Catherine Restivo from Reddit user Cake Crumbs. A rest stop so bad it errs on the side of evil.
I worked in the truck stop industry for about 15 years. All of the following stories took place at the same location. I worked there for a little over a year. I have other stories from other locations, but this one had the most frequent occurrences of weird stuff. I was given the opportunity to help open this brand new location, and since it came with a fat raise and a promotion, I happily accepted. It's now been about 5 years since that location opened. Out of over 60 employees we hired for opening day, I don't think a single one of them still works there. On opening day, shortly after the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a woman delivering flowers dropped the flowers on her sandaled foot and sliced her foot open, bleeding all over the entrance. Little did we know, the bloodied threshold was an omen of the cursed occurrences that would follow. Within a week of being open, we had water and sewage coming through all of the drains, both indoors and outdoors. It hadn't been raining. There hadn't been a flood or any other unusual weather. We have no idea what caused this to suddenly happen, and just as quickly as it happened, it went away. The plumbers were baffled. A couple of months after we opened, we faced a severe storm that destroyed the high-rise interstate sign and caused a 7-hour power outage. I had sent several people home, but kept a couple of employees, just in case the power came back. As we sat in the restaurant dining room, chatting under our emergency electric lantern, an employee who lived in the town all her life mentioned that people were a little worried when the construction of this place was announced. This property was rumored to be a Native American burial ground. I had no way to prove or disprove the accuracy of this, but as time went on and the ensuing events became more serious, I started to wonder if the rumors were true. 6 months after opening was the first death. A truck driver came in to take a shower in one of the shower rooms, and we had sensors on the doors that let us know how long someone had been in there. If the timer had been going for a couple of hours, we would knock on the door to see if maybe they had left so we could clean it for the next driver. The employee knocked on the door of the shower that had been in use for a couple of hours, and there was no answer. She used the key to open the door, and the driver was on the floor. He had died of a stroke. He had been driving a semi-truck 30 minutes before he entered that room. I can't imagine what would have happened if he had still been on the road when he died. The employee who found his corpse was significantly traumatized. The company did a great job of offering support for her, but she didn't last much longer after that. A few weeks later was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I was working on the restaurant side of the truck stop. The restaurant manager had quit after a series of bad things that had happened to her, and they asked me to move into her role temporarily. The assistant manager on the store side came over because the freakiest thing had just happened. She pulled me into the store side office and pulled up the cameras to show me what had happened. A small 4-door sedan pulled into the lot, but didn't pull into the gas station side. It pulled into the truck stop side, where the semi-trucks pull in. He parked next to the maintenance shed, which was located adjacent to the main building and very close to a large trash compactor. He got out of the vehicle, opened one of the doors, and pulled out a trash bag. He threw the trash bag on top of the compactor. Then he got in his car and left the property. We fast-forwarded the footage to about an hour or two later, when the man returned. He pulled back in next to the compactor. He got out, climbed on top of the compactor, and chucked the bag onto the roof of the maintenance shed. He then climbed back down, got into his car, and left, never to return. This is when he was noticed by an employee who had been outside gathering trash to take to the compactor. The maintenance shed is a small building about 20 by 20 feet. If the employee had not seen him throw it up there, it may never have been noticed, as the building was the height of a one-story building. Once the employee saw this individual leave, he went into the shed, got a ladder, and went to get the bag from the roof. He brought the bag inside the store to show the assistant manager. Inside was a ton of paper. These documents listed hundreds, if not thousands, of addresses across the United States. Under each address was a specific hidden location on each property where a body could be found. No information on who the individuals were, just the sex and location of the individuals on these properties. The location spanned from coast to coast, but I didn't get a chance to examine them too closely. I was really freaked out, and I thought that touching them would maybe contaminate something. So we just put what we had pulled out back into the bag and called the police. Now, the thing about truck stops is that they are often in remote locations along interstates. The town this truck stop is located in has 3 police officers total. It is a town with less than 1,000 people. So when I say the chief of police showed up, it's because he was the highest-ranking officer of the 3 in the town. He hated us, as truck stops bring crime, and suddenly he had a lot more work to do. He came in, watched the footage, and looked in the bag. He was not concerned in the slightest, which frustrated me to no end. He asked what we wanted him to do about it, and said it was probably a prank. His reaction made no sense. He took the bag of papers with him, filled out a request form for the footage, and left. My hope is that he at least forwarded this to the FBI. Just a couple of weeks after this, the body of a bound, nude, and recently deceased man was found across the street at a dump. Because it was a dump, they had no idea where the individual had originated from. Sometime in the following weeks was the second death on the truck stop property. It was a driver who had died in his truck. Somewhere in the middle of all this, we had another severe storm, and the interstate high-rise was destroyed again. Then we had another weird incident involving abandoned things. A driver came in to show us that someone had left ratchet straps and small children's clothing folded up neatly next to a diesel pump. The combination of the items was alarming to me, so I got on the camera system and called the police. I was able to find the truck that left the items, and luckily this time, I got the one amazing police officer in the town. She actually did her job and followed up with me to let me know that she had found the driver and called him. He had just been cleaning out his truck and found some of his kids' old clothes, as well as some straps he didn't need. He thought maybe someone else could use the items and didn't think about the combination of the two, raising eyebrows. He was actually really grateful that somebody was worried and followed up on it. At least this incident had a resolution. A couple of months after the first year mark, the State Department of Transportation had to shut down the ramp to the interstate exit. It had started to collapse, and they were worried that the overpass would collapse as well. We had almost no business for weeks as construction crews rebuilt the ramps and repaired the overpass. It was during this time that I earned a promotion to general manager and was moved to a different location. I kept in touch for a while, especially with my former boss and the assistant manager. The incidences continued. A couple of months after I left, there were 2 major incidents. One was a customer who attacked a teenage cashier because he didn't get the customer's lotto ticket correct. The maintenance guy came to the kid's defense, and the customer got into a brawl with him. The second involved an aggressive individual who entered the building with a machete, terrifying the employees. I wish I could still access the security footage of the state troopers coming in with AKs and drop-kicking the guy. I have no idea where this person came from as he walked, and this location was 10 to 15 miles from the nearest town. Slowly, over time, I lost touch with my former coworkers, and they both left the location, so I stopped getting the stories. Was this infernal truck stop haunted? A portal to hell? I don't know. But what I do know is, I now avoid truck stops like the plague.
Our final story is about a lingering presence that watches you while you sleep. Narrated by Kat Carter.
When I was just a young girl, I lived close to a major river system. I had this big window by my bed that looked out over the hill of a grass paddock with a big dam at the bottom of the hill. We were told as kids never to go near the dam, but we didn't want to anyway. It wasn't a normal dam like the ones I would swim in at my friends' houses. No. The water here was stained a putrid black. Plus, we had a pool. What I remember as a kid is looking out late at night and swearing I could see a man standing by the water's edge. It was always dark, but every night I could make out his silhouette just standing there. I'm not even sure what compelled me to stare out the window at night to begin with. I would cry out to my parents about it, but then they thought it was just a young girl's imagination and always sent me back to bed, scolding me for opening my curtains. I sometimes question whether I was really seeing that man on those nights, but I'm certain about one particular night. It had been raining for a few days. I felt almost safer then, as I couldn't see too far down the paddock through the thicket of the falling water. It didn't stop me from staring out the window nonetheless. After I had been looking out for a while, a lightning bolt split the sky, and in that light I saw the figure again. But this time he wasn't near the dam. He was further up the hill, just on the boundary of our yard. I was absolutely terrified and screamed the house down. My parents tried all they could to calm me down. They assured me that no one was there. But as they were looking out the window, lightning lit up the clouds and illuminated the outline of a man standing underneath the palms right next to my window. He was looking right at us. My mom clutched me and frantically told my father to call the police. He instead grabbed his rifle, turned on the spotlights, and started scoping the outside of the house. He let out a few warning shots, but he never saw the man. My parents finally believed that there was someone out there that night, but they refused to believe that I had seen that figure every night for years. We eventually moved from that house a couple of years later. In the meantime, my parents had planted bushes outside my window to block the view, so I couldn't see out anymore and nobody could see in. I would still gaze out some nights through a crack in the curtains and through the slowly growing shrubs. Sure enough, there was always a man standing in the shadows that I could barely make out. I knew it was him. I've never seen anything like that, and I hope to never witness something like that again. It traumatized me, and I still suffer from sleeping problems to this day. I can only imagine what it would do to me now.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producers are Noah Fouts and Elizabeth Flood. Our audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Gerardo Orlando. Until next time, stay safe out there.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.